Gus looked around nervously. Eris's cry hung in the air. Solomon stood proudly at the entrance to the drugstore, holding a brown bag overflowing with black licorice. Solomon shoveled a surprising amount of licorice into his mouth. Beck cupped her hands on the glass to peek inside. Beck flung open the door, and they all squeezed in. Luca cracked his knuckles and entered the letters into the keypad. The inside of the phone booth dropped loose from its shell. Without even the space to panic, they closed their eyes, held their breath, and accepted their fate. Suddenly, the chaotic descent slowed to an effortless landing. It was unclear where they ended up, but at least it was solid ground. The air was stagnant and smelled vaguely of chlorine. Rollo's hands hovered over the field of blinking buttons. Joseph waited for a moment in silence. He gestured toward the strange tubes. Nuncreed let out a growl of He shook his head wistfully. Nuncreed took a menacing step toward. Luca began to laugh. The color drained from Nuncreed. Nuncreed grabbed Luca by the shoulders. His eyes were A jolt of realization struck Mr. Nuncreed. Chapter 8. The Cold, Hard. Beck leapt up, allowing the suction to yank her into the dark. Dimness eclipsed around her like the shutter of a camera, as she seemed to cover great distance in mere moments. Her only points of reference were glints of upcoming turns, which approached. She heard the tinny, distant echoes of Rollo's glee. Once she stopped fighting against it, the ride was impossible. Then, all of a sudden, as if minutes had passed a burst of wintry air snuffed across her face, and she was As they rounded the corner to the frozen town square, they spotted Mr. Nuncreed inching cautiously toward a pit at its center. He held his arms out gingerly, as if approaching a beast in the wild. Upon closing the distance, Luca recognized what Nuncreed was after. Gran stood confidently at the edge, one arm out nearby. A wheelbarrow had been emptied out. She held a lit torch, which flickered in. Mr. Nuncreed turned back toward the kids, desperation in his. Rollowenbeck held steadfast in awe. Luca approached closer. Mr. Nuncreed spun back toward Gran, his voice growing louder. Mr. Nuncreed winced with anguish. His voice hardened. They both now yelled, not to each other, but at fate, making their peace with long-held burdens. The wind howled with encouragement. They menaced at each other, both catching their breath. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Amid a blur of emotions and memories, Luca's mind flooded with questions. The wind calmed, as if to give him this. And in the stillness, after the death of his father, Luca had trouble sleeping. Each night, his mother would sit at the foot of his bed and hum a gem. It was the only thing that could calm his mind, the only thing that, however briefly, could make it all. That melody pervaded every memory. Luca, shivering in the raw snow, he began to. Gran lowered the torch. Listen, as recognition slowly set in. Those countless nights of consolation, the incomparable loss they shared. She let the torch fall to the snow and a few steps toward Luca was all she could bear before dropping to the snow herself. Through a flood of tears, she began to hum along. His head in the last time he heard that melody was the last night he saw his. Luca blinked through blurry, watery eyes, trying to see more clearly. He could just make out the impression of a familiar. He peered across the snowscape at the woman on her knee. Something about her was undeniably his, only smaller, older, changed. Sprinted as fast as he could toward his mother. They held each other close, and the cold retreat. Eleanor looked down at Luca, tightening her embrace in an appeal for forgiveness. Joseph slumped into the cold wet. For the first time in a long time, her voice felt like her. Luca gazed down at Nuncreed with pity. He looked small. Joseph stared into the snow as if. Chapter 9. The Devil You Know. 7 months ago, Eleanor Van Horn crept down the maze of sterile halls. She stopped in front of the large steel door marked Deep. No turning back now. She raised a trembling hand. The stolen keycard worked as promised, and the door bust open with mechanical efficiency. She was immediately hit with the smell of disinfectant. It was some sort of laboratory. In one corner was a desk covered in papers. Across the room stood a tall metal pod with hoses protruding from its base. She rushed to the desk and began shifting through the piles of papers. They were experiment reports on something called Tempest Liquamen. There were dozens of them, every one stamped. Eleanor heard the sharp echo of footsteps approaching. She was out of time. Her eyes scanned the room, eventually landing on the strange pod. Muttering a curse under her breath, she dashed over and dove inside. Mr. Kerr addressed the crowd with a sarcastic tone. Whispers filtered through the crowd. Torment dragged on Joseph. He paused for a moment, plucking a piece of fuzz from his sweater and discarding it to the ground. Kerr gave a bow of deference. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Solomon pulled a glass vial from his... In one smooth motion, a triumphant smile grew across Solomon's lips. His body and face began to contort and a horror. This is a story. Sharper examined his new hand. Sharper choked out a crude frustrated grumbles spring. William Kerr gave a subtle nod to the clipboards. A helpless quiet settled over the crowd. Sharper addressed the crowd with indignation. He'd planned this moment for so long that now, at the deed's fruition, it almost felt frivolous. Mr. Kerr flourished a preposterously elaborate bow. Sharper coughed up one final laugh and cracked his knuckles. And so, Sharper set about. The fertilizer factory soon reopened for business. Sales rose steadily as more and more farmers across the countryside began to swear by its miraculous property. Beacon Pines became famous, a secretive town that, for the right price, shared its gifts that became more and more necessary in a world where the end. This is wrong. You can feel it, right? We can't. Let's see. And in the stillness, it was all just falling to his knees. Luca, the tears crystallized as they hit the... Gran stared at Luca for a moment with warm sympathy, remembering. She stiffened up and brandished the torch at Mr. Nun. Ignoring his final plea, Gran flung the... She smiled and exhaled in relief. Mr. Nuncreed. The torch echoed as it ricocheted down the hole, punctuated. Before Gran could finish, the ground shook her to... Gran only had time to spin around. Her attempt to shield him, an honorable but unflinching love, pitted against an unthinking. There was no contest. Her warm embrace froze. That is where they remain, fixed in place. And so, our story in a town brought low by its the end. Well, that was on the bright side. Now, we just need to find a way to deal with a mystic. There was like a trap ready to spring. Luca felt the weight of Nuncreed's hand on his shoulder. Something wasn't right. He didn't know why, but something was telling Luca. Luca twisted free of Nuncreed's grasp. The two scurried off, eagerly formulating. He aired a long holler into... Luca felt his eyes getting heavy. He conceded to its lumpy... Once again, Luca found himself in a... This time, he knew exactly. He took a single confident step forward. The world flickered and pulsed. He found himself standing in front of the frigid air of a blaze. The source. He plopped down cross-legged and gazed into the cold flame. Soon enough, the fire began to die out, popping sporadically. And Luca stood up and dusted himself. He plucked the glowing ember from the cold ash, examined it, a keepsake. The voice of his father spoke behind him. "You made me proud, Buckaroo." Luca turned to face him. "Dad, What is this place? A warm grin grew across his face. A place where everything that has been and everything that could. Luca found himself staring at his father's face, trying as hard. Wait? Another voice spoke out as Luca's doppelganger stepped forward. Without knowing why, Luca began to weep. Is any of this real? Luca's father bent down to smudge away a tear. Of course. I'm as real as the part of you that misses. Luca turned to look at the older version of himself. And you? The doppelganger choked back tears. I'm as real as the part of you that's angry. That makes through his tears. Luca. His father pulled him in for an embrace. Time to go, buckaroo. Luca was startled from his dream by a bang. A commanding voice rumbled. Just as Luca sprang to lock the... Chapter 5. Dangers big and... Luca stumbled back. He heard the rope keeping his eyes fixed on the hatch as his hand grasped the door handle. Luca, a large figure clumsily... The large figure cocked its head inquisitively. Luca's jaw. He peered more closely at the man standing in front. Something about him was only bigger or changed. Rollo proudly presented his hands to... Luca moved to the side and pointed Rollo to his reflection in the balcony window. His hands shot up to his face. Rollo shadowboxed a few jabs. With a yelp, Rollo... She shot a nervous glance at... Beck's eyes narrowed. to put on a smile. She sighed, and after a moment, looked down at Bex. She flashed a sly grin and tussed. Luca gave Rollo a quick elbow to the ribs. Beck flicked a large sheet of paper out of her pocket and slammed it on the floor. Rollo started to wiggle with excitement. Chapter 6. The Heist. They spent the night's end huddled around that small map, formulating a plan to infiltrate the headquarters of Perennial Harvest. It would be no small feat. A modern facility equipped with all manner of technology, not to mention the swarm of clipboards that would most certainly be scattered throughout. By the time the sun began to peek through the car window used as a makeshift balcony door, this could just work. The final day before the festival would be used to prepare. They'd need to pool every resource at their disposal, pull every favor with a thread. Even enlist some unsavory characters around town with important tasks. Luckily, there was enough ill will and mistrust toward Perennial Harvest that aligned. Luca, Beck, and Rollo rubbed their eyes as they exited the treehouse. They hadn't slept at all that night. The festival was to begin in one day. He waved vaguely at Rollo's. Beck snorted an involuntary giggle. They each looked at each other with sleepy Jeff wheezed out a long. The joy in Jeff's face drained instantly. Looking into the sullen eyes of his would-be accomplice, Luca wasn't ready to get. He shouted out. Jeff's brow perked up. Sensing some traction, Jeff's scowl faded. One good stomp of the foot was all Jeff needed to drive his point. Luca offered out his open hand to seal the deal. With a firm and dusty grip, Jeff reciprocated. Iggy raised an eyebrow. Luca knew they'd need. He tried again. Iggy gave a reluctant. Iggy gave a reluctant shrug. Iggy considered the point. wild-eyed grin spread across. Iggy glanced over to Tish, who nodded in agreement. With a quick nod, Luca was off. Iggy gazed up at Tish with a smile. A single tear ran down Tish's cheek. Chapter 7. Into the Hive. A good heist requires, and thorough preparation takes time. So far, everything was in order. Jeff, Iggy, and Tish all. Beck radioed Luca that night with a simple and covert message. And Rollo, after a lengthy he stowed away in mission control for the night to avoid attracting attention. Rollo, being uniquely suited for the role, would be the first to. The outfit provided by Jeff wasn't perfect. Rollo took a few vigorous breaths. He had to think quick. Rollo sighed, adjusting his tool belt. With a stroke of his mustache, he stammered and flipped through the pages of his clip. Rollo interrupted with urgency in his. Rollo panicked. The distraction was enough for Rollo to regain his compass. The clipboard fumbled around in a frenzy. Solomon stopped in his track. A veneer of confusion flashed across. His words rushed out. Solomon's facade briefly faltered. Luca happened to notice a plaque above. Luca tried the handle. Solomon leaned forward to examine the mechanism. Luca smiled and looked. She mimed a quick hat tip and ambled off with a whistle. The light on the keypad changed from red to green. Luca switched on his walkie-talkie. On the computer screen, a green cursor. Luca pecked out his best guess. The screen blinked to life. Solomon's jaw clenched into a half. Luca quickly scanned the columns for number 247. Once again, Luca scrutinized. In that moment of distraction, Solomon reached forward. He quickly skimmed the screen with his finger. Mr. Kerr approached with a sneer and spoke into his walkie-talkie. With self-satisfaction, he called into the hallway. Nellie leaned over to examine. Nellie sighed. Luca held his hand up to the Luca tugged on each of the cabinets. Solomon muttered in Solomon once again muttered under his breath. With a subtle, quivering lip, a smile. They heard the trampling of frantic footsteps from the hallway. Her eyes searched the floor. Solomon watched eagerly. With a sickened look, she peered. Solomon clapped with genuine. Solomon glanced down, examined. Kerr presented it with a theatrical twirl. Before he could finish, Rollo snatched the vial from Kerr's palm. Rollo casually tossed the vial to Luca. Luca jiggled the vial mockingly. She held it tightly behind her back. Solomon sighed, speaking in He pursed his lips with feigned sincerity. A deep uncertainty washed over back. She looked to Nellie with a dispirited nod. Nellie sighed and Beck slowly approached Solomon. With apprehension, Solomon pocketed the vial and brushed off his shoulder with a sharp flick. The blood drained from Kerr's face. Solomon shook his head with gratification. A muffled applause resonated faintly through the walls. Nellie was staring at the floor, deep in... The color dropped from Luca's face. Luca was overwhelmed. A sudden explosion sounded from the hull. Chapter 8, Comeuppance. Ears still ringing, Gran picked herself up off the ground. Through the dust and smoke, she looked over to see Mrs. Fratelli helping Hiram Tolliver to his feet. She'd had to beg, borrow, and steal to acquire those explosives. How many nights had she spent visualizing how she'd use them to make things right? And now, her one shot at destroying the source, that traded for this jagged hole in a wall and a foolhardy shot. With Fratelli and Tolliver at her side, she stepped through. It was a strange feeling. The last time she'd stalked this maze of hallways, they quickly rounded a corner to find a group of clipboards guarding a door. Something worth guarding is probably something worth seeing. She leapt forward, brandishing her cane. If her last chance at vengeance for things lost was truly gone, she would just have to fight to keep what she still had. They made their way out from deep within Perennial Harvest, just... Solomon pulled a glass vial from his... In one smooth motion, he downed its contents. A triumphant smile grew across Solomon's lips. With a mischievous look, Beck remember when I had the vial behind my back? I might have tweaked his wonder potion with a little malice. body and face began to contort and expand. In stunned silence at the now empty stage. The quiet was broken when William Kerr sprinted. He was never seen around Beacon Pines or any. Watching the silhouette of Kerr disappear over the first, a low chuckle that became through his tears. He was vaguely aware that the crowd. That was perhaps a bit of an absurd ending for my taste. I'm only writing the damn. I might have tweaked his wonder potion with a little junk. His body and face began to contort. As the last of what was once Sharper Valentine was gone, his end would be a new beginning, a new chance to let go of Well, if that feels to you like a good note to end on, I won't. I might have tweaked his wonder potion with a little change. His body and face began to contort and Eris awkwardly cradled the squirrel. She looked to her brother, her voice shaking with uncertainty. She looked back down at the infant with equal parts kindness, and with a shake of her head, Eris addressed the crowd with a stern At the Beacon Pines' coldest summer on record came and went without much fanfare.